Okay, I guess we'll start promptly. Good morning, afternoon. My name is Dolores Brown. I'm with AFSA as the Retirement Benefits Counselor. I am a recent retiree from the Foreign Service, so I'm happy to see all of you here, and I hope that this presentation will help you. I'm very pleased to introduce Dwayne Jackson. He is a principal, i.e. an owner of an financial advisory organization called RPJ Advisors, which is situated in Falls Church. Duane is a frequent speaker at the Foreign Service Institute, so he knows us, he knows our particular financial profile, our particular financial problems, and he specializes, in a sense, in trying to make the complex understandable. He became a certified financial planner in 2000. He began as a certified public accountant with Grant Thornton when he first started his career, and he was specializing in taxes. And then he transitioned to financial planning by joining Academy Insurance Agency. So right now he identifies asset protection and wealth accumulation as his specializations, both music to most people's ears, I'm sure. He then went on to own his own financial investment advisory firm before joining forces with RPJ in that particular firm. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Dwayne Jackson. Please welcome him here. We're very pleased to have him. One last thing I neglected to mention, we are videoing this because we put all of these videos online so that our far-flung membership will be able to see this. So at the end, when there's questions and answers, I'm going to be running around with the microphone. I ask that you wait for me so that people will be able to hear the questions. So that's all.
Thanks. My mic live? Good afternoon, everybody. Sincerely appreciate you being here. Love the fact that you have seated yourselves in the first couple rows. I don't know what the nature of most people want to sit in the back, and hardly anybody ever sits in the front. The people in the back are the ones that get picked on, not the ones in front. So you saved yourself from that. Dolores contacted me to do a kind of a lunchtime seminar for you, and I said, what are you going to do? Give me like 2.5 hours? And she goes, well, more like 40 minutes. And I said, 1 hour and 40 minutes? And she goes, no, it's pretty much going to be like a 40-minute kind of a thing, questions and answers. And then you kind of rack your brain with all the things that I talk to my clients about. What can I say that's important and impactful in 40 minutes, right? So I'm going to walk you through what I think the most important thing is that we do for our clients, which is this retirement projection kind of a model. And I see that there's some youngsters in the group. This is appropriate from you. There's some of you that are a little older than the youngsters in the group. This is appropriate for you as well. I am more in a financial planning investment advisory role. I tend to be more of a behavioralist than a stock analyst. I think very few of you all have made bad investments. I think most people make good investments, but sometimes they make bad decisions, and their behavior is kind of what runs them askew of financial success. So we're going to run through this model. I have some other topics that are pretty important and kind of timely in my client base today. Dolores asked me to kind of go through my presentation and then kind of open up a Q&A session instead of being interrupted because of the taping and everything. But certainly, jot your notes down. I told my office I have all kinds of time to hang around and answer specific questions at the end if you want. So it's important for us that you spend your time today. Very much worthwhile. So, okay. So lifetime financial success, kind of a simple model to keep you on track. I talk with a lot of people who are in there building for retirement, pre-retirement, getting into retirement. And a big question I get all the time is, I've done a pretty good job of accumulating money. I have no idea how to get it back out. Is that, yeah, you know. So if you all fit the bill for most of the Foreign Service clients that I have, you've done a pretty good job of accumulating assets through a savings plan's been good to you. You might have IRAs, Roth IRAs, you may have had some inherited money and stuff. And we have these pockets of money. Now it's time to reduce it down to systematic and reliable monthly income, right? Because it really doesn't matter how much wealth you have in pockets. You have to be able to pay your bills on a monthly basis. If you're not really sure what I'm talking about, talk to any farmer, right? On paper, they're worth $3 or $4 million, but they have a hard time paying their electric bill or their feed bill because it's that monthly income. So what I try to do for my clients is to walk them through, it'd help if I turn this on. This is the disclaimer. Okay, all right. That would take 40 minutes. So one of the things that I talk to our clients a lot about is maintaining your wealth despite inflation and taxes. Dolores and I had a lunchtime conversation. I have parents and in-laws all in their mid-80s. I had a client yesterday leaving to see her 96-year-old mother, right? I went to my aunt's funeral Saturday. She was 88. So people are living a long, long time and are in retirement for decades, right? So we've got to be able to set up the money game to be able to win it over a few decade time period despite the onerous effects of inflation and taxes. And the most important thing that we do financially for our clients is kind of build this retirement model and keep it fresh for them over the years. So a good part of our 40 minutes really is me asking you very simple questions, and if you're following along in your notes, write down your simple answers, right? And it's going to be a pretty neat little model, and if you do this and if you keep track of it, I'm pretty sure that you'll do pretty well in retirement and planning for retirement. So I always ask clients, what's your desired retirement age, right? Now, the way that I define retirement is the day that I don't have to go to work. And I might work 20 years beyond my retirement, right? Some of you all will have a forced retirement age, but that doesn't mean you're going to completely stop working. You might become a consultant. You might start a new career. Sky's the limit, right? So it kind of depends on, to me, is at what point do you want to say, I don't have to work. My finances will carry me from this point forward. And if I do work, it's more for the socialization of it, more for the personal achievement of it, not because I have to bring in and require monthly income. Pick a number, right? When I did this slide 20 years ago, I chose 60. There's no good attributes about 60, nothing bad about 60. The only important number is what? Your number, right? The only important age is your number. And then the next question is exactly how much cash is needed per month. Extremely simple question, but you wouldn't believe how long we spend trying to figure out the answer. So the question I ask all my clients when we do this model is, how much cash do you need to hit your checking account the first of the month so that the next 30 or 31 days are no big deal? How much cash do you need to hit your account the first of the month so that the next 30 or 31 days are no big deal? How many of you all have a pretty good idea of what that number is? Very good, okay? If not, consider this a pretty good homework assignment, right? If you're not sure how to calculate that number, I don't like the 70 to 80% rule of thumb. You'll probably need 80% when you retire. You'll probably need 70% when you retire. Because I have a lot of people that look at me and say, you know what, for the first, 10, 15 years of my retirement, while I'm healthy and still vigorous, I want to go do things I haven't done. I want to see things I haven't seen, right? Visit with people I need to reconnect with. And that's probably going to take what? money, right? Probably going to take a fair amount of money. So I have a lot of clients that say and sometimes they'll use words I can't pronounce. They'll say, no, I don't have any tolerance for less income. Heck, when I retire, I want to have money and time at the same time, right? Through my career, I've had one without the other a lot. I want to have both at the same time now. And a lot of people spend their excess time doing what? Spending money, right? So how much cash do you need the beginning of the month to get you through the next 31 days? If you're a little bit younger and your focus right now is not significantly on retirement, but just trying to build wealth towards that, then the question is, what are the basic expenses that need to get you from here to the end of the month? And then we'll build in some variable expenses and lifestyle expenses. X thousand dollars. I don't know what that number is for anybody in the room. In my client base, the lowest number is about $4,200 a month. The highest number is $20,000. Sincerely, okay? And I can't keep them on the $20,000 budget. They're always spending a little bit more. So the reason I give you the 4,000 and the 20 is I bet your number's probably going to be in the middle somewhere, right? Trying to be helpful, trying to narrow it down for you. Your number's probably going to be in the middle a little bit. Annual increase per year. If you haven't noticed, what do prices do every year? In general, they go up. And just because you retire doesn't mean that phenomena ends. While you've been working, while you've had promotional increases, step increases, pay increases, you get these big, wonderful COLA increases every year, right? All right, just making sure you're still listening to me, okay? Making sure we're not having settled into that post-lunch doldrum yet. But for most of the people that I talk to, while they're working, while they're still in their career, they don't have a hard time keeping up with inflation. They don't have a problem keeping up with rising costs around them. When does it get more difficult? When you retire and you're more on a fixed income, right? And your COLA now is not tied to the CPI index. It's tied to the chained CPI index. So somebody decided, you know what? Behaviorally, when the price of steak goes up, people don't consume the same amount of steak. What do they buy? Hamburger, chicken. When the price of gasoline goes up, we typically drive less. So anytime the price of something goes up, behaviorally, we compensate for that by spending less money on it. So somebody down at the General Accounting Office said, well, if people don't spend up to the rate of inflation, then their income doesn't have to keep up with that. So don't shoot the messenger, that's what's going through their head, right? So the chain CPI is essentially trying to quantify behavior in order to give you what? Less, okay? So most of the time when I run a retirement model for clients, I'll run 4% a year. If you're retiring on $7,000 this year, I want the opportunity for it to be $7,200, $7,300 next year. I want it to have the opportunity to be $7,500 the next year, because insurances and taxes and groceries and contractors and maintenance, everything goes up over time. Now, big question for you all, certainly, is you have this X thousand dollars per month, but how much of that is going to be provided to you by a relatively guaranteed source? And what do I mean by a relatively guaranteed source? Kind of the federal government, okay? So your pensions, Social Security if you have it, spouses' pensions, spouses' annuities from a school system or a hospital or something with pretty solid financial foundations. For the majority of my federal employees, that number comes in at about 40 to 80%. I have some retired federal employees who retired senior executive service, SERS benefits, 35, 40 years. What's their percentage? 100. Yeah. I mean, the federal government gives them on the first of the month everything that they can possibly spend for the next 31 days. Man, turn the lights out, you hit a home run, you won the game, right? But most of my federal employees and my younger clients are down on the lower scale, 40 to 80%. Now, if we want our income to go up by 4% a year, do you think these income sources, this pension and Social Security, is going to go up 4% a year? No, it's designed to be less. It always has been, and it always will be. So we will typically run the escalation on pensions and Social Security at 1 or 2 percentage points less than what you want your income to go up by. So typically you're going to arrive at this magical age called retirement with a what? A gap between what I call life and lifestyle, okay? Life is making do with what they give you, right? Can you live on only your pension and or Social Security? Yeah, right? If that's all there is, that's all there is, and you'll figure out a way. But a lot of the people that I talk to want what? More. You can say it, okay? They want a little bit more. There's nothing greedy about that. There's nothing evil about that. It's called taking a base of life and adding to it to have a lifestyle or a standard of living that you aspire to, okay? So typically there's going to be a gap, and if we put this on a graph, it looks something like this. You pick out what your retirement age is, 55, 65, 70, doesn't matter to me, it's your life, right? You want X thousand dollars a month, 6, 8, 10, 12, I don't know where that number is going to fall. And we need it to go up by 4%. Now, how many of you all are pretty good mathematicians or statisticians or engineers? Okay. When you take a fixed number and compound it by 4%, you should get a nice, smooth, exponentially increasing line, right? But I drew mine all wavy. This is your income needs line. This says every year, based upon what your expenses are going to be and how much we want for lifestyle expenses, trips, vacations, etc., this is how much money I'm going to need every year. So the math says this should be a very smooth, exponentially increasing line. Why do I draw mine all wavy? Because that's life. Great answer, okay? I ask rhetorical questions, Dolores, I'm sorry. Because that's life. Life is not smooth and predictable, right? So that X thousand dollars is what gets me through the month routinely. But if you own anything, Murphy's Law says eventually it's going to do what? Break, right? It's going to need to be repaired. A car, a house, a boat, anything at all, right? Pets. I've had clients in the last 2 or 3 years pull out over $20,000 for dental implants. Wow, okay? And I'll be quite honest with you, I'm 56, will be 57 in November. That was kind of a shocker to me. I really hadn't seen that much before. But oh my gosh, I talked to Mr. Rembert, the fellow who founded our firm in 1974. His client base tends to be a little what? A little more mature than mine. He goes, happens every week, right? So there's going to be these times when we need a new furnace, we need a new air conditioner, we need a new roof, we need something, right? So what fills this gap? Pension and Social Security, as we said, is going to be somewhat below this line. The big homework assignment is to figure out what these two numbers are so that we can quantify this gap. And once I quantify the gap, then I know easily, fairly easily, whether or not the resources, the income items that you have, are going to be able to bridge that gap, right? So our income is going to go up 2 to 3%. We want it to go up 4%. So what bridges the gap between life and lifestyle? Okay. So It's pulling money out of your thrift savings plan. It's pulling money out of your spouse's 401k plan or 403b plan, IRAs, stocks, bonds, real estate, home equity, could be inheritance, right? So when you look at these items, thrift savings plan, IRA, stocks, and bonds, pretty self-explanatory. When I did this slide a long time ago, I was thinking about real estate. Real estate for a lot of my clients plugs the gap, and it comes in one of two ways. Perhaps you were fortunate enough to buy a piece of property at the intersection of Main and Maple, and they put a major interstate exchange a mile or so away, and all of a sudden that little piece of property that you paid $10,000 for is worth what? $250,000, right? Whatever the numbers might be, okay? Sell that, make it a part of your portfolio, you can draw down returns, that bridges the gap. The other part of real estate is perhaps you've picked up a couple rental properties during your career. Somebody else, while you've been working, while you've been overseas, et cetera, has paid off the mortgage, and now you arrive at retirement with this rental property giving you a couple $1,000s a month of free cash. That free cash bridges the gap between life and lifestyle. Home equity. A couple ways to get money out of home equity. When you're in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, what's the classic thing that we do to capture our home equity? Sell and move to Florida, right? What's wrong with that? Well, now you're in Florida, right? So, okay. But typically it's, hey, I'm going to sell a very highly appreciated home up here and get at least what I need to get for half the money down in the Carolinas or Florida or something like that. And I can capture that equity. The other way to capture equity is being promoted very heavily right now by Fonzie, Henry Winkler, okay? And the newest proponent of this is Tom Selleck. I don't know if you all have seen those commercials, okay? Why does Fonzie and Tom Selleck love reverse mortgages? Somebody's paying them to do the commercials, okay? I don't know, right? Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they have done a reverse mortgage and they're reaping the benefits of it. I don't think so, okay? I think it's more that they're being, okay? But in a client base of a couple hundred, I have 3 people that have actually done a reverse mortgage and love it. I have 3 or 4 people a year ask me about it and typically decide what? Just when you add up all the benefits and disadvantages and all, it's not something that I want to do. But it is a way to get money out of your home, reverse mortgage or sell it. Okay? Inheritance. When do I include inheritance in a client projection? When they get it. Okay? I can't tell you the number of times in a 25-year career where I've had somebody say something to me like, you know, Mom's doing okay, and she doesn't complain about money, and she has her group of friends, and they go to lunch, and they go to the plays, and she's doing quite well. I imagine when she passes, and you know, I don't want it to be anytime soon, but when she does, I'm sure my sister and I will probably split something like $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. Okay? Mom dies, estate is settled, Jack gets what? $58,000. Okay? Where's the other $250,000? Yeah. Now, maybe Mom spent it in a nursing home or private duty nursing. Maybe Mom never really had the assets that they thought she did. Okay? And it's just very interesting. I don't know how many of you all have elderly parents at this particular point, but my father called me into his office the day I turned 25-ish and said, hey, anything ever happens to me, here's an accordion file of where you need to do what you need. You know, had copies of insurance policies, people to call, et cetera, et cetera. And through the years, we have taken stuff in, and that's my dad, very transparent with what's going on. My father-in-law, information is doled out on an as-needed basis. I saw him at dinner one time, when his wife asked him, my mother-in-law, "What are you going to have for dinner?" And he said, "You'll find out when the waitress gets back here." And I looked across the table, and sometimes I talk without thinking, and I said, that's a really jerk response. Well, yeah, I mean, why can't you say fish or pork chops? What's the big deal, right? Anyway, so I typically don't include inheritance until I know my client has it in hand, okay? What's the L? Not loan, lottery, very good, okay? Why in the world would a financial planner put lottery as a winning mechanism to, okay? I do seminars across the country, have for years and years, and I'm always the first one in the room, right? I'd rather be 30 minutes early than 3 seconds late. So I hear the side conversations when people come in, and every now and again, somebody will look at somebody else and go, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that you were planning for retirement." And the other person looks at him and says, "There's no way I can retire until I hit the lottery." So I've heard that enough to I figured it's got to be some people's plan, so I put it in my, okay? Fact of the matter is, most people within 5 years of a major lottery do what? Become broke again, okay? They become institutionalized or they're deceased. So winning a major lottery is not a good thing for the great majority of people, right? Anyway. People will take their chances, you know? Yeah. My wife buys them when it gets up to like above 500 million. And I look at her and go, 300 million wouldn't change your life? I mean, what's the magic about five? Now you have an exponentially lower chance of even winning anything, right? Anyway, so if you're at retirement, getting close to retirement, edging into retirement, then what we want to know is, does your thrift savings plan and draw down on your IRAs, selling stocks, bonds, real estate, home equity, etc., can you generate the income off of that to bridge the gap between life and lifestyle on an inflation-adjusted period for how long? For how long? 30 years? For the rest of your life, right? Let me talk to the women in the group here for just a second. Guys, I beg your patience, okay? Statistics are out now, ladies, that says if you reach age 50, I don't know, very few of you are close to that, but if you reach age 50 with no condition of heart disease, circulatory disorder, or cancer, your life expectancy now is age what? Who am I talking to? 92. 92. Okay? Follow-up question. Guys, I'm talking to the ladies. I'm trying to keep you out of trouble. Is that good news or bad news, ladies? Bad? Bad? Why? It depends. Living to 92 is good or bad depending upon what? Your health and your wealth. Okay? Your health and your wealth. Nothing that you're going to hear today out of this talk or reading any magazine or whatever is going to guarantee you success. But there's things that you can do now, a little bit of a time for the next 30 years, that are going to make the probability of better health and better wealth a reality. Okay? So I stress that to my clients a lot. We still have a pretty long road ahead of us, right? Guys, I've never actually seen that statistic for us, but we typically trail the women in our lives by 5 to 8 years, right? You look at most mortality, 5 to 8 years, right? Why do we die younger? Because we're men, and we just kind of want to, right? We don't have the constitution to live the way, you know. I know there's genetics and hormones and all that kind of stuff, but overweight, absolutely. So, bridge the gap between life and lifestyle, and this is going to take a good long time. It's going to take 3 decades or so to get through retirement. Do you know that it cost about 18 cents 30 years ago to send a letter first class? And what is that number today? 55, I think, right? The funny thing is, very few people know how much a first-class stamp costs these days. They go, I don't know. Okay? So between 30 years ago and today, the price of stamps has tripled. Don't say gone up. It's tripled and has been a very poor proxy for inflation. Meaning inflation has been worse, right? So if we have decades to win this financial game, it's going to last for a good long time, and expenses are probably going to triple. Okay? All right. So that was the major thing. And we revise this for clients, quarterly basis, annual basis, anytime something major in their life changes. And it does kind of keep them on track, because I am convinced that the great majority of people don't make bad investments. Sometimes they make bad decisions and behavior, and I think that's kind of where the game for most people is won and loss. Okay, a few more minutes, Doris. Okay, all right. So a couple other things that is going on with my clients right now. That retirement planning projection is the most important thing we do for our clients financially. The most important thing that we do for them, period, is to make sure they go through a good estate planning process. So I would want everybody in this room to have a very good, durable general power of attorney. If you are sick or injured and you are unable to talk to the thrift board, Social Security, OPM, Human Resources, your IRA company, who's going to talk to these people for you, right? So I would rather have you make that decision now rather than the courts make it for you, right? So I want you to have a good general power of attorney. Advanced medical directive. Most states now have combined the healthcare power of attorney. It's kind of like the financial power of attorney for healthcare, routine medical stuff, and the living will. The living will is what? Pull the plug, heroic acts, how you want things handled right at the end of life and death decisions. You can see that there's probably a big gray area between these two. So most states have combined the healthcare power of attorney with the living will, and then something called the advanced medical directive. If you want to spend a mindless 12 minutes, pull up the Seinfeld episode on YouTube and go through Kramer's. Okay, well, all right. So I think it's pretty funny. My mother had an emergency surgery 5 years ago, and it was one of those things where nobody really knew what was going to happen. She gets out, she's in intensive care. The intensive care nurse looks at my father and says, "Mr. Jackson, does your wife have an advanced medical directive or a living will?" And he goes, "Yes, she does." Third time in my life I'd ever seen my father cry. First two times was his parents' funeral, and this one was when he thought he was going to lose his wife of over 50 years. And she said, "Do you have these things?" And he goes, "Yes." She goes, "Can you bring me a copy in the morning?" He goes, "I'll bring you a copy, ma'am, as soon as she wakes up and tells me where she put them." Okay. Met somebody the other day, put all their important documents in a safe deposit box. You can't get to it. Okay. So everything, all the instructions are in a safe deposit box that nobody can get into, and you can't instruct them. You're not able to. So be careful if you've done that. Okay. If you have, make sure somebody is a co-owner, and make sure they have a key and they know where it is. Okay. All kinds of issues with that. Last will and testament. If you haven't done one, it's the state laws for you. Okay, extremely important. And a revocable trust. Most of my clients will do a revocable trust to hold assets, right? And if you listen on the news or you listen in an advertisement, it'll always be for the avoidance of probate, which is important. But the benefits of a revocable trust are more while you're alive if you go through a period of incompetency. Okay? If you have assets in different states, if you have assets at various brokerage firms. So one of our clients had an Aunt Marilyn in Philadelphia, and Aunt Marilyn had 42 investment accounts with 33 different investment companies. Okay? So if she died with all of those owned in her own name, the executor would have to do what? Set up an estate account with 37 companies and go through that probate process. We got it all into a trust before she died, and then the executor just did the paperwork from his office here in Virginia. Okay? So these are extremely beneficial instruments. I'm not an attorney. We're not a law firm, but I really want to make sure that you go through a very proper estate plan. The investment environment's pretty challenging now, isn't it? Isn't it kind of fun to be in the market? Okay. I like showing my audiences this. So this is the thrift savings plan returns for the last 10 years. Look at the C fund, 13.17% average annualized for the last 10 years. Do you think that's going to continue? No. It's going to be what? I don't know. It could be higher, it could be lower. I don't know that I would base my projections on a 13% annualized return out of the thrift savings plan. A good part of this 12 and 21 and all returns, 13, 32, was Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, Microsoft, and Facebook. Have you heard the financial press refer to the FANG stocks? Yeah, okay. So when you look at your thrift savings plan, which is the S&P 500, there's 500 stocks in the S&P 500 index, right? But the top 10, the biggest 10 stocks, make up nearly 20% of the entire value of that index. So it's not nearly as diversified as what you might think it is. Of those 10 stocks, 7 of them happen to be in what sector? Technology. The other one, Amazon, is considered a consumer cyclical. But to me, Amazon is just as much a technology company as anything else, right? I mean, it's kind of how they're building everything. The interesting thing, if I backdate this to 2017, the C fund had only done 8% a year. Isn't it amazing that in 1 year the statistic can be different by 5%, right? But when you look at how this is composed, the first year in this 10-year statistic is 26%. If I back it up 1 year, the first year is minus 36, the financial crisis, right? So I always tell people, when you have somebody like me use a statistic to try to get you to do something, be what? Careful, skeptical, right? Because if I want to make a point, I can go find the data to make that point, right? The biggest one I like is, oh, you'll be fine in the market for a 5-year period. You know what? 75% of the time, 5-year periods do really well. And as soon as I hear 75% of the time it does well, what's triggered in my head? 25% it doesn't, right? And can you handle if it's a 25%? You know, gee, Dwayne, how are we going to get across this canyon? I don't know. I guess we'll have to walk across this log. What do you think our chances are? 3 and 4 will make it, right? I'm not stepping out on that log, right? But sometimes people say, 75% of the time you'll be fine. Oh, okay, good. Okay. So I just like to show that. The I fund, the one thing that's interesting, the thrift savings plan, I don't know if you've noticed, just reconstituted the asset allocation in the L funds. You know how the L funds are pre-packages of your original 5 and they have an asset allocation? And if you're far away from retirement, it's kind of aggressive, more stocks. But as you get closer to retirement, it kind of gets more conservative. Like the 2030, 2040 funds, 2050 funds are 25% I fund, which is developed Europe, Asia, Australia, and the Far East. It's predominantly developed Europe and Japan. And when I look at Europe and Japan right now, I don't get why they're thinking that 25% of your money should be there. My opinion. I'm just throwing that out there as conversations I'm having with. Went from 2.23 to 2018. Okay. Couple more minutes. Randomness of returns. I love this. Oh my gosh. So if you take all the asset classes, stocks, bonds, small stocks, large stocks, growth stocks, value stocks, international stocks, large and small, bonds, domestic and international, and rank them from 2004 to 2018, best returns to worst returns. What I want you to do is find your favorite color in 2004 and track the progress left to right. And then pick out your next favorite color. Track that left to right. Figure out what the pattern is. And then try to figure out the interrelation of the patterns. When almost black and purple are up, gray and lighter purple are down. And see how long that lasts. And what you'll find if I come back in a couple days, that this chart is very what? Random. That's why. Okay, random. But it's funny how interesting mutual fund companies want to tell me what's going to happen in 2019. Right? They come in, it's March, they're saying, oh, you know, we've got our portfolio set for the rest of 2019, and we're pretty much convinced this is what's going to happen. And in my mind, I go, no, you don't. Okay? You don't. Because it's very random. This is your thrift savings plan. This Army green is the C fund, the S&P 500. From 2004 to 2012, on a relative basis, it was very what? Very moderate, kind of in the middle. Always something doing better, always something doing worse around the world, domestically and around the world. And all of a sudden we hit 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17. And in 2018, it was the best stock performer in my group, except for real estate. Commercial real estate did a smidge better last year. And if I back this chart up into the 1970s and brought it forward, you would find the S&P 500 kind of in the middle, and all of a sudden it's had this huge surge into the upper quadrants. Why? What explains that? You've benefited greatly from it if you've been in the C fund, right? Well, in this time period, the Fed took interest rates from what, 5 or 6% to nothing and held them there for years. At the same time, the Treasury Department down the street did what? Remember quantitative easing, 1, 2, and 3, printed money, threw it into the economy. Where did that printed money find itself? Wall Street, right into the S&P 500. At the same time, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and Microsoft decided to hit this technology wave and kind of blow things out of the water on a return basis. So I have kind of a perfect storm, and that's been captured largely in your C fund. How long is that going to last? You think so? Congratulations for your optimism, right? I wish I knew the answer to that question, right? If I knew the answer to that question, where would I be right now? I'd be fishing somewhere, okay? Love you guys, really do. I'd rather be fishing, okay? So it is kind of tough. Just don't get too overly exuberant. That's kind of my point, okay? All right, randomness of returns. The hardest topic I have right now in my client base is talking to clients about what to do with long-term care. So as we go through our retirement model, what's the biggest thing that could blow a hole in that? Medical expenses and long-term care, okay? The traditional ways to insure or transfer risk from long-term care has largely gone away. The current policies that you have are escalating pretty sharply in price, and it's hard to keep up with that on an annualized basis. The newer way are these hybrid contracts. It's long-term care, but also has a life insurance component to it. Structurally, they're better. They also come with a what? Higher price tag, right? So it is very difficult, and in a 30-second snippet, believe me, I don't have the answers, but it is something that I want each of you to think strongly about and talk to mom and dad. You know, talk to mom and dad. Resources, these are like websites that I find myself on more often than not. I'm on AFSA all the time, afsa.org, tsp.gov. One of my favorite ones is dinkytown.net. Sounds kind of funny, kind of came out here down in the end, but it's all kinds of financial calculators. You know, what if I want to pay my mortgage off early? How much interest am I going to save? What if I refinance? Exactly how much is that going to cost me? What if I want to loan my son $20,000 and make him pay me back with interest? That kind of a note. Okay. All right. So do we have time for questions? Kind of hit some topics there.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful. I'm a single person with no dependents.
Okay.
And a retiree.
Okay.
And in the past, before the recent tax bill, I looked to enhance my deductions.
Okay.
To reduce the amount of taxes I paid. With the new bill and the elimination of the $4,000 personal exemption, there is less value in having mortgage interest deduction. So, for instance, I'm paying off my mortgage
Right.
instead of and not accumulating that on the taxable side.
Right.
So my question to you is, do you have a good resource about taking traditional IRA money, right,
Okay.
that is taxable income, and giving it to a charity to both cover the charity deduction you don't have anymore and reduce the income, because now the goal is to reduce income. Do you have
Right.
any thoughts on like the value of that, what to read for it?
Well, to me, it's honestly, it's less about taxes and almost more about your philanthropic nature, right? So if you want to be charitable and you want to be able to do gifting, and you have to take a required amount out of an IRA or thrift savings plan, then doing it directly from the custodian to the charity makes sense, okay? Doing it directly from the custodian to a charity isn't going to increase your charitable expenses for tax deductibility because you're taking it above the line. Reduces your income, absolutely. So my first thing would be is, can you afford that reduction in income? I would assume at this point you've done that work and say, yes, I can. So at that point, it's a very effective way to do your gifting, which has ancillary benefits to it. So it seems like you're doing the right thing.
I haven't done it yet.
Oh, seems like you're going to do the right thing. Yeah, good.
This is probably a fairly basic question, but I'm looking for a new financial planner, and so I've been going on different websites around where I live, and in some cases they have minimum portfolios before they'll take anyone on.
Sure.
So sometimes it can be a bit intimidating, but I don't know how they calculate. Does that include like what you currently have in your retirement funds? Is it I just don't know how they add up to
Right.
whatever minimum they
So
get.
typically for most investment advisors, their minimum assets under management are the assets that they're managing for you or they're assisting you in managing. So it's going to be your investment accounts, okay? Some companies include the thrift savings plan, some don't, right? Typically it's not home equity, you know, it's not the value of your personal effects or anything like that. It's just the amount of investments that they're going to help you manage, So.
Hi, thank you. This has really been fascinating. In your chart where you show the gap between retirement, pension, Social Security, and inflation, in your client base, have you had people try to start a business with their son or with their relative or some kind of business income? Is that a possible source
Oh,
of
absolutely. Absolutely. So part of that becomes earned income, and that kind of goes back to that question of, are you doing it out of necessity, or are you doing it out of more, you still want to be challenged, you want to get a reason to get up every day and things like that. But kind of ending your career here and then starting something new and exciting, sure, I've got all kinds of clients that do that. A lot of retirement plans are very generous for self-employed, small companies. You can do a lot. Because a lot of people say, I hate that I'm not in a thrift savings plan anymore. We'll open up a small 401k plan or a simple or a SEP. There's all kinds of retirement plan benefits for you as well. So.
Yeah. I apologize, I came in a bit late. Did you talk about Social Security and the merits of taking it right away or waiting a bit? On the paper this week, they talked about how, talking about the baby boomers, and they said that since 2000 that the Social Security benefits have decreased by 1/3. So there's one argument that you take it now and invest it and go with it, and another argument that you hold on to it and wait till you can get the most bang for your buck. So do you have any thoughts about that?
My thoughts on that is, how long are you going to live? All right. So it's typically a payout to your expected mortality, right? So if you still have talks every day with your mom and your aunts and things like that, chances are you're going to be on the other side of the mortality statistics, and it would be advantageous for you to wait. Plus, every year that you wait, the Social Security benefit goes up 8%, right? I would say hold on, unless you're struggling today cash flow wise, right? I don't want you upset every month on the 28th because the income just isn't there. But if you're doing okay, let that roll. I'm not going to promise you that investments are going to do better than 8% guaranteed going forward. Yeah.
I'm going to work my way towards the back.
All right, just a really quick question on life insurance, and I think this is a common question people have, FEGLI versus like USAA, and the relative benefits. I think, FEGLI, they don't check your health, and it's, you can go indefinitely, whereas USAA is, do you have quick thoughts about that? And also, as you hit 60, it goes up like crazy, the cost, and what are your thoughts? Or would you do both? Which I actually do both.
Right. So the first thing is to actually understand what your life insurance need is, right? So a lot of people, they'll carry life insurance, and I'm like, why do you have this life insurance? And they go, I don't know, I've had it for 20 years. Okay. Well, are your kids grown? Yeah. They doing okay? Yeah. Grandkids okay? Yeah. House paid off. Cars paid off. You don't need $800,000 of life insurance, right? So that's step number one, is to put pen to paper and figure out how much do I and how much longer this is going to last. Once you hit about 55 or 60, that FEGLI becomes exorbitantly expensive, right? And it's largely tied to your employment. So if you plan on needing life insurance into retirement and you're in decent health now, you can get a policy in the private sector that's guaranteed to not go up for the next 10, 15 years, 10 or 15, maybe even a 20-year guaranteed level term policy, right? So I typically don't, from a seminar stage, say this is the best thing, because for your specific situation, I don't know. But if you're in pretty decent health, doesn't have to be perfect, but if you're in decent health, that USAA term policy is a great alternative to the every 5-year escalating FEGLI, right? Now, don't you dare do anything with that FEGLI until that USAA policy is in place, right? 40% of chronic illness in men is diagnosed by life insurance and employment-related physicals, because we don't what? Have the sense enough to go get an annual physical, okay? So you might feel okay, blood work might show something else. Good question, thank you.
Hi. If you have a durable general power of attorney and you really trust that person to make decisions for you, do you really need a revocable trust? And assuming that you don't have a complicated financial situation, just 3 or 4 accounts. And the related question is, I noticed none of your websites have anything on do-it-yourself legal documents.
Okay. To me, the durable general power of attorney and the revocable trust are not either or, it's both, okay? There's no legal precedence for any financial institution to accept a power of attorney. So somebody goes into a bank and says, hey, I have mom's power of attorney, we need to cash in her CD. The bank person's going to say, we're going to give this to the legal department to review. The legal department's going to see how long that power of attorney has been in effect, and if it's more than 3-5 years, they'll throw it in the trash and say, get a court order, okay? If you walk in as the trustee of a revocable trust, you have legal standing and essential ownership rights to manage that property, okay?
Yeah, but on that point, if your power of attorney is the same as the beneficiary on your accounts, then you need a revocable trust.
Well, the power of attorney is to deal with things while you're alive. The beneficiary only deals with it once you're dead, right? So the revocable trust, and I'm not saying everybody go out and do it because I don't know everybody in the room. I would say if you have started to accumulate assets, if you have assets in different states, if you have any kind of a tricky beneficiary situation, or if you have profligate children or something like that, then there are very good advantages to a revocable trust, right? Not everybody needs it, but it's one of those things where I want you to understand it so that you can say, we can do without it. But a lot of times it's extremely beneficial. So your last question was website on do it yourself. When I have lunch or dinner with attorneys, they tell me they love LegalZoom, that it is a great generator of business for them, okay? Because when you have to rely on a legal document that you have done yourself, and I'm not talking to you, you might be an attorney, you might be very intelligent about all, but if you've done something yourself and now you would need somebody else to act upon it, it's typically you can't back it up. They can't question you for your intent. Exactly what did you mean by this? Because you're on a operating table someplace, right? So to me, there are things in life that we can kind of get by on the sly with. Then there's things we can do more cheaply than, Harris Teeter's versus Whole Foods. LegalZoom.com versus getting this stuff done by it's a one-time, it's going to be $4,000 or $5,000. To me, it's worth it.
I loved your slides on TSP and long-term care. Like many in this room, I've benefited greatly from the decade-long incredible bullish market. I was even lucky enough in TSP to be able to find refuge in the G Fund in early 2008.
Okay.
When it was only about 15% down, and get back in after March 2009 after it had hit bottom. So I was lucky. I rode that out pretty well with TSP. However, if people didn't get back into the market soon enough, they could lose those gains. So I mean, now my challenge since, and I think AFSA, having been a retiree counselor myself, and Dolores does a great job of providing, with John Naila, on providing information on retiree benefits. Mm-hmm. But the big problem now is how to keep your TSP up with the, when you take it out. Now I can confirm, having talked with many financial planners trying to work this out, that anyone with a TSP, they want to there are financial planners who want to talk with you. You're definitely a platinum potential for them. But what I have found in looking at trying to get into some type of a rollover into something which would provide fixed index annuities that provide that hedge to provide a potential for gain in good market years, but protect you against losses in bad market years to keep my TSP from ever going down. And the thing I like about it is they do have LTC riders. And I never got into long-term care insurance because I was a little ambivalent. But then I found that now at my age, at Medicare age, it's prohibitive to get in. And you're still looking at benefits that you may not use, but you'll be paying for, whereas the riders provide a lot of. So I was wondering if you had any ideas, and also whether in trying to make sense out of that Milu, if you find Morningstar or other sites a good way to compare annuities and these type of vehicles.
Sure. The big thing with indexed annuities is that when they promise you something in one hand, they're paying for it in another, right? So I would just say make sure that you understand thoroughly the benefits and disadvantages of any contract that you get in. If they're guaranteeing you 4% when T-bills are 1, there's a reason for that, you know. And if you can deal with that over time, that's completely fine. I don't have an axe to grind one way or the other what wins the game for you. I really haven't gotten too much into those long-term care riders that have been associated with that. I actually have a couple brokers that I work with who that's about all they do is long-term care, and I kind of let them do the ferreting out and the education on that specifically.
You at least have the benefit of covering the possibility, but not denying you the funds if you end up never needing it.
Never needing it. Exactly. Yeah.
Dwayne,
Like anything else, it's an arrow in the quiver, and it deserves due diligence for sure. But no, that's a good point.
I think we have 2 more questions. I saw 2 more hands. Do you have time for that, Dwayne?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. It was just a follow-up on the Revocable Trust. You mentioned the different states, and state has a nice program, Work Life for You, where they give you a little break on your first consultation with an attorney. We went to see somebody here in Virginia and talk about a Revocable Trust, and because one of our properties is in New York, he just didn't know what to do. So it's like, must we go to every state where we have a property and meet with a lawyer and set it up? So how do you consolidate everything you have from different states into
No,
one?
you should be able to do your trust locally, and then just have that asset retitled into your trust. And that's really the only thing that needs to be done, so that that asset is now owned by the trust. And then if something happens to you, it's not a probatable asset, right? Absent that, your executor would be going to New York to open up an estate account in that jurisdiction to deal with that asset. So do that revocable trust and just simply retitle it into the trust. So if there were other questions, it sounds like maybe there were other questions about maybe asset protection or something like that, but I'm surprised that the attorney would go, I don't know what to do without, but maybe there's something there I'm not picking up, so. Nope.
Sorry.
That's okay.
To follow up on that, when you say retitle it, so you have to go to the state where you have the asset, and you need to retitle it at that state under your trust?
You have the property records changed to where the asset is not owned by Jane Simpson, but the Jane Simpson Revocable Trust dated whatever. So, and a lot of times, I mean, it can be done through the mail, you know. I mean, I tell my clients locally, you can go to the Arlington County Courthouse and figure out how to do it, or you can give the attorney $350 and let them do it correctly. You know, what's your time worth? But
I'm just thinking, I have property in other places, and so, but for example, I inherited it, so the title on it still has my father's name on it, but it also had my name on it, and I just inherited it because I did everything you said with all the rest of it, so I didn't have to go through probate.
Good.
But I've never gone and retitled the house under just my name. It's always it's been both. So now if I do this revocable trust, I need to create that and then go and retitle it.
And have that retitled. Now, you may have to contact an attorney in that jurisdiction, but typically a local law firm can go into, oh heck, what's that? I want to say Merriam-Webster, but that's the dictionary. But it's something like that. There's a national, something like that, yeah, where they can say, hey, you know, this firm in this jurisdiction can do the retitling, and you know, it's going to cost you $300 or $400, but that's the proper thing to do with that asset. So remember, I'm not a lawyer, right? And I'm not practicing law. I'm not even getting close to the line of practicing law. These are just suggestions.
So I've got a couple different retirement funds from different parts of my life. TIA-CREF and then TSP are the
Okay.
two big ones. Okay. I was just wondering, you know, with TSP, I guess I'm always afraid that, you know, even though the costs are low, it's not managed as effectively. But I'm just thinking about rolling over like one to the other. Do you have any thoughts? Because it's all in life cycle funds now at this point. So I don't know whether it makes sense to keep both, or is there some advantage to rolling over into one?
I mean, the advantages of consolidating them is that you now have one account to keep up with instead of two, right? Both of those, when you hit 70 and a half, you're going to have to start taking required distributions out of each account. If it was one account, you'd only have to worry about one account, you know. TIA-CREF gives you a lot more investment options, right? The thrift savings plan, you really only have 5 investment options. The L funds are not any different. They're just prepackaged versions. So from an administrative standpoint, I would go from TIA-CREF to the TSP in a heartbeat. Yeah, I wouldn't go the other way. They're just difficult to work with. Yeah. They're just, I don't know. I know they're just a cumbersome custodian to work with. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm not saying their funds are bad or anything like that. But I just know from an administrative standpoint, when I hand Liz a stack of papers, Liz is my assistant, and she thumbs through it and sees TIA-CREF, this is the expression I get. Oh. You know, so as far as managed versus unmanaged, very few managed funds perform at the level of their index or benchmark. So the fact that the TSP is unmanaged in our indexes, I actually think is an advantage. But it just, you know, so what you might want to consider is taking the TIA-CREF and just doing an IRA, and then being able to manage your IRA to get investments that you can't get in the TSP, and do that at Vanguard or someplace where the expenses are still extremely low. Yeah.
I think we have one more question. Do we have time for that?
Sure,
Am I right about that? Okay.
The only thing standing between me and the cold weather is the other half of my BLT that you got me. So I've got time to.
I think it's of general interest. If you have a mutual fund or even the TSP, there's a designation of beneficiary option thing that you should do, or a transfer on death. They all have one or the other depending. So do you think it is wise to designate specific individuals, or to just say the estate of John Jackson?
Okay. Great question. Naming beneficiaries is a huge hot topic for me. I make all new clients prove to me who their beneficiaries are, and if they can't, we refile the paperwork. Yes, because if we don't know who the beneficiary is, what a disaster if something happens to you, right? So for qualified accounts, retirement accounts, TSP, IRAs, Roth IRAs, there are big tax advantages to have those inherited by a real person, right? So if we're naming children or whoever that beneficiary may be, my question to my client always is, what is your confidence with their ability to manage this account? and you get an answer right away. Oh, they're very mature, they do great with their money, etc. I don't have any problem that they would handle it. Great, let's name them as the direct beneficiary. Okay? If their reaction is a little more like, ooh, man, I don't know. I bet they could squander, then I would probably want to name a trust as the beneficiary and put a trustee in between the money and that beneficiary, right? To name the estate of a qualified plan, you're subjecting that IRA to taxation immediately, right? So if we can name an individual or a trust, then we have the ability to keep that tax deferred wrapper on that account for possibly decades, right? And you can even take a qualified account, name a trust as the beneficiary, as long as the custodian will recognize that it is qualified property and will keep the qualified nature of that account for the beneficiary. But you have to make sure the custodian is equipped to do that. For non-IRA, non-qualified accounts, if it's not owned by this revocable trust, then do a Totten payable on death or something like that, to where it goes directly to them and can avoid probate that way.
Actually, for both of them, it's generally better for both of them, whether it's just a regular mutual fund or some kind
An
of
IRA.
an IRA.
To have a real person be
to
the
designate
beneficiary.
a real person.
As long as that real person can handle it.
As they're adult, they're whatever.
Well, just because they're adult doesn't
Right.
mean they can handle it.
Thank you.
Well, I guess we're going to close on that note. But at any rate, I wanted to thank everyone for coming. I wanted to thank Dwayne Jackson very much for sharing his expertise with us.
Thank you.
It's good seeing you. Take care.